of the cool things about macrobiotics is that there are so many ways to prepare vegetables, one of which is called a pressed salad. Pressed salads are a nice alternative to a green salad. By lightly massaging a variety of thinly sliced vegetables with a small amount of salt and allowing them to sit with a little pressure for about 45 minutes, the veggies become more digestible and very tasty. They add an element of crunchiness to a meal and are colorful and refreshing. Pressed salads make a great side dish in warm weather. You don't even have to turn on the stove to make it. All that, and they're good for your liver. If you're serving something with oil that might be hard on your liver, like refried beans, fried rice, or even fish, pressed salads help to balance that oil so that you don't get that greasy feeling in your stomach. They're a delicious addition to your repertoire, so let's get started. I'm going to show you how I make a pressed salad. I'm lifting this one from one of my favorite macrobiotic books, The Hip Chick's Guide to Macrobiotics by Jessica Porter. I think she calls it the harvest salad. I'll be showing my own variation of it. Many pressed salads have as their base some kind of cabbage. This one starts with a Napa cabbage. It's sort of oblong, you've probably seen them, versus a head cabbage, which is round. It also has some other ingredients in it, red cabbage, carrots. That recipe calls for a Granny Smith apple. I happen to have a Fuji, I've done it with that, it's great. That's basically it. Sometimes I add a little celery and scallions. We'll see as we go along what I'm in the mood for. A pressed salad is not cooked, it's just pressed with a little bit of salt lightly massaged into it. So I took the white part, separated the white part from the stem. We're going to use both. Important to have is a sharp knife. It makes slicing it easier. Okay, so first make myself a little stack, and then I'm going to slice very thinly, because when you massage the salt into this, if you have big thick pieces, it won't do very much. And the function of the salt is to sort of start to break down the structure of the vegetables. So it kind of gives you it makes the nutrients a little more accessible and digestible than if it's just raw. So you can see how thin these are. And I'll just keep going with this. Notice I'm using my same technique, hand sort of in a claw, thumb tucked behind, just thumb and forefinger at the beginning of the blade, lightly holding the handle. Oh yeah, I guess I should make sure I'm in that camera too. Yeah, okay. I just keep going down. Then when I scoop it up, because I've got a nicely sharpened blade, I don't want to drag my blade across at 90 degrees because that'll dull my knife blade. So I can either use the back of my blade or hold it sort of at the angle that I've sharpened it at, and I'm going to put it into this big measuring cup. You need to know how much salt to put into this, and I have to know the volume of the vegetables that I'm going to be pressing, because that will determine how much salt I put in. Okay, so now I'm doing the stem part. Notice I'm doing it at an angle, partly because I want more of the interior to be exposed, because it makes it more accessible to the salt. But pretty thin, almost sort of see-through. Okay. So what was that? That was 2 leaves. Then I'm going to put in some red cabbage. Now, red cabbage, or head cabbage in general, is more dense, not as watery as the Napa cabbage. It can take a little longer to press, so I try to make it very small. Like, I will probably mince it. I think I'll just take off a little piece like that, because I don't want this to be all about the red cabbage. Then I think I will make very thin slices. So these are pretty thin, but I'll show you what I'm gonna do. Won't do the whole thing at the moment. Then I'm gonna put them together and sort of mince them. So I'm still kind of controlling the pile with my left hand. And I scoop it up and put it in there. This is more for color than for anything else. I mean, it's a nice cabbage, but I don't find it to be as sweet as the Napa. And because it takes a long time to press, I don't want very much of it in there. I think the recipe called for 1/4 cup of this, 1/2 cup of the Napa, but I tend to put in more Napa. Okay, then carrots. So now I'm gonna matchstick these carrots, and hopefully you've watched the other video where I matchstick them, and I'm trying to make them thin because this is such a funny shaped one. It's hard to not rock it. Now, see, these are thin. Ooh, where are you? About a 1/16. You can use root vegetables in a pressed salad, but they have to be sliced very thinly because otherwise the salt will take a long time to do its magic. And if you don't, you'll be kind of like eating raw vegetables. Okay, so I've got just not quite 2 cups in there. I usually, if I'm going to bother making this, I make like 4 cups of it. One thing I like to put in here is some parsley, and I just happen to have some in my garden, so that was handy. You could put the stems in there too. I don't know why I didn't. I will just chop them up really small. That's a lot of parsley. But I'm going to add some more Napa cabbage to it. Balance it out a little bit. Back with another carrot. So I'm going to say that this is just about 4 cups. Now, I think the recipe called for 1/2 cup of Granny Smith. As I said before, I'm doing Fuji. I'm going to matchstick these as well. Probably not going to fan these out. I'm just going to slice right down. Now, if your knife isn't sharp, this won't be easy. And maybe the apples will even slip away from you. So you really want to have a nice sharp knife. Okay. So I'm calling that almost 1/2 cup. I guess I may as well just finish this thing off. Okay, so in a minute, I'm going to add the salt, but I'm not going to put the apples in until the end. Okay, definitely a 1/2 cup now. So I'm going to put what has now become 4 cups, I wasn't going to do that, of vegetables, because I added a little more. My general rule for how much salt you put into a pressed salad is 1/8 teaspoon per cup of cut vegetables. So I had 4 cups of vegetables, so I'm going to put 4/8 or 1/2 teaspoon. of sea salt. Now, I use a brand called C as in SI, like yes in Spanish. But you can use whatever high quality sea salt you find. This is usually the recommended brand as being one of the most pure brands. They haven't done things to it. Okay, so now it's in there. I see a clump of it. Okay, so now I'm going to start lightly massaging. So I'm not rubbing it hard. It's somewhere between mixing and massaging is what I'm doing. And I'm trying to make sure all little pieces come apart because sometimes pieces stick together. And I'm going to do this for about 5 minutes. And what will happen is that the salt, see there's a couple pieces that are not completely separated, the salt will start drawing the moisture out of the vegetables. And that's what you want to have happen. It'll start to get, the vegetables will start to get a little broken down, a little bit wilty, not so crispy. There's starting to be some moisture released already. And they're starting to get more softened, I guess. But you can see these are getting wilted, I guess would be the proper term. So I think you can already see that even though I started out with approximately 4 cups, at the end of this, I'll probably have half that. I can see my hands are wet. Maybe you can see that the moisture is starting to come out. The bottom of the bowl is getting a little bit of moisture on the bottom. If I wasn't going to add the fruit, this is where I'd stop. But I have my apple. If I put the apple in the beginning, there's so much moisture in apples that they would disintegrate. So I'm going to just gently sort of fold them in, like mixing it around just a little so that I know that the salt has gotten to the apples too. Making sure they're all nice and separated. But that's about it. I'm not going to do very much because I don't want them to completely come apart. Notice I picked a flat bottom bowl. You don't have to, but this bowl is the one I always use for pressed salads, and I'll show you why. I searched around in my kitchen to find a plate that would fit inside, and this one happens to work with this bowl. So put it in there. It's not a tight fit, but it's a pretty good fit. It's, of course, too tight, it's not going to work. And you can have a little more gap around yours than I do. It's surprising how much kind of leeway there is here. Now, I'm going to put a weight on it. Like a jar, what is this, a quart jar, about halfway full. And then I'm going to just put this out of the way, like a place where it's not going to get bumped in the kitchen, for 45 minutes is generally, 45 minutes to an hour. I think in the recipe it says 30 minutes. It's probably fine. It really just depends on how thinly you slice the vegetables. So I'm going to get this out of the way. While that's pressing, so I'll make a note of the time. And I'm going to toast some pumpkin seeds, so because I like that on top. I think the recipe called for walnuts, but somehow I started doing this once with pumpkin seeds and I really liked it. Here we are. I put about a quarter of a cup of pumpkin seeds in here on a medium flame, and I'm just going to toast them. And at the end, when I serve the pressed salad, I'll just put these on top because it adds a nice little element of crunch. So there's not much to this. Medium flame. I shake it. I think it's easier to shake when you've got this kind of curved shaped frying pan. But if you don't, you can just stir it around with a wooden paddle until they get kind of golden. If they start hopping out of the pan, that tells me that it's too hot. I suppose you could also do this in the oven, but it seems like a lot of, I don't know, heat to generate in your kitchen for just toasting a few little seeds. I'm gonna show you the next step. Take the weight off. Take the plate off. Now, normally I do this next part over the sink, but it's too much moving of cameras, so I'm just going to do it over the plate. You can see it's gotten pretty pressed down. Let's see if you can see if there's liquid. Okay. See there's a little liquid in the bottom? So I'm going to empty the contents into a strainer. And sometimes I press it down a little bit, make sure as much moisture comes out of it as I can manage. Liquid is coming out. If I were a little more patient, I'd probably let it sit a little bit longer. And I think I got most of it out. So if it were too salty at this point, you could rinse it. I prefer not to. I prefer to just use less salt in the beginning and not have to rinse it, because I think it takes some of the flavor out. Now it's kind of compressed, so I'll fluff it up a little bit. All right, so now I'm going to season it, and I think it needs a little bit more tartness, so I'm going to put in a few drops, not much, of brown rice vinegar. I think it's salty enough. If I thought it wasn't salty enough, I would have put some umeboshi vinegar in it too. As it is, I'm going to put in some dulse flakes. So dulse is a sea vegetable. It's been dried. It's kind of sour and salty. I'll show you. So this, I bought this in the flake form, as you can see. Looks really nice too. It adds just a little zing to the whole thing. So I don't know how much I put in there, maybe half a teaspoon, maybe a little more than that. And then I'm just gonna sprinkle my pumpkin seeds over it. Sometimes I mix it up. I probably should have mixed it up first, made sure all that vinegar was in there, and taste it a little bit. But this is the basic deal. And I think it's kind of delicious, and I hope you do too. Hope that helps.